What's up? Hey, everybody. Hi, Wyatt. Hello. So that's okay. We're gonna do a little backstory and then we get into like what reality is. So I got into crypto because of some kind of like unique like synchronistic thing, which it is some hippie bullshit. I can tell you about it later, but it's not a story for now. But the TLDR is that they like really deeply focus on like what is the nature of like truth and what is this life really? Like, what is it? And the answer I came to is consensus. And what that is, to me at least, is everyone experiencing the same thing all at once. And that's actually what RealityNet actually is. And it is consensus that's constructed out of everyone or like every device machine in the world experiencing the same thing all at once. Okay, so like what do I mean, right? Blockchains are consensus engines. They're a routine that machines do as a collective to figure out what's actually going on, like what's up. It's a truth machine for computers. And computers themselves, just like people, need a reality. Everyone experiencing the same thing all at once. All devices need to experience the same thing or like state all at once. Everyone needs to participate in order for this to actually work the same way that all of us participate in the same kind of baseline reality that we experience every day, right? So every machine needs to participate. And there isn't necessarily like Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum blockchain. In reality, there really is just the blockchain, which is kind of funny. And you hear like kind of like the joke like, oh, it's the blockchain, whatever. But we're going to get to it in a second. But that's actually the truth. And that's what we've done. So yeah, I mean, the real talk here though is that it's not like a blockchain is necessarily like a piece of code or something. Like everyone who like actually uses this technology like is the blockchain. It's the people especially who operate the servers that are connected in consensus as well. All of our apps too, not just like smart contracts, really need a truth machine. If you don't believe me, then you should ask Plato, I guess, or at least read that whole allegory of a cave saying, because when information comes from one faucet, one set of elites, whether it's in like Athens or Silicon Valley, you can know for a fact that what you're consuming is just flat out bullshit. Is your LLM actually telling you the truth? Or is it just well-packaged propaganda making you feel smart in exchange for getting brainwashed? Consensus is nothing new, but if not, everyone can participate. Like the same mining farms hosting most of the Bitcoin networks out there, there's just going to be a bunch of oligarchs serving us a bunch of slop, bullshit, masquerading as truth. That's really the baseline, and that's kind of like why am I making yet another blockchain? Technically a DAG, but whatever. So what do we do to actually solve this problem, right? So obviously, if you want to get every single machine to be connected and participate in this sense of reality, like we need scalability, right? I mean, all of us have been stuck in bottlenecks. I mean, remember the mining wars in 2016? It was impossible just to like send one transaction without spending $1,000 just on gas fees, right? So what we did is we used the same architecture that powered like the big data movement, specifically something different than sharding. It's called dynamic partitioning. And what it does is it enables like a quality known as horizontal scalability, where basically the more nodes or servers that join, then they can join just like whenever it makes sense. It makes everything just like faster and more coherent. The two biggest tools out there, one of which I've been a contributor on, the other one I've like used probably too much, is Elasticsearch and Sparks. And yeah, it's basically kind of like the backbone of like all the different really like highly scalable Web 2 apps you use. I mean, Twitter literally like did most of this actually and spent a bunch of money like building all these open source tools, really becoming the first kind of like legitimately scalable social network out there. So a little history on that. We have another aspect too called reality checks, which are state proofs for software. So unlike a smart contract, which is really just kind of like a primitive proof system, it's essentially just proving something like an Excel spreadsheet. We have this really cool, some people call it an execution environment. I hate that phrase, or like a code runner, whatever. But basically you can put any code that can compile down to WASM into this thing and implicitly outputs ZK proofs, which are like actual fully fledged proofs for Turing complete code. I think it's a general solution to the halting problem, but I will leave that up to the Turing Award Committee. And yeah, it's really cool. It does stuff on like the software level. We also have this other aspect that we've colloquially called Chain, but it's essentially state proofs for hardware. So you got your software and your hardware. Chain is really cool because what it essentially does is it's a framework for building your own like blockchain that uses something called a recursion scheme. And recursion schemes are really important and really cool because they basically allow programs to introspect on their own state. If you guys ever read that book or whatever, I'm a Strange Loop, I'm not going to like plug random books. You can use an LLM for that, but it's kind of similar to that. Specifically, we use a recursion scheme called a hylomorphism, which is able to basically build up and tear down program structure while sort of keeping like almost like an echo or like a ghost of like what the actual like program state did, and use that in order to create a proof. And so at the end, like as a little aside, like about this, like in pure, like in mathematics in general, there's this concept called topology, which allows us to basically introspect on data, a manifold or some kind of state space, and sort of like recohere everything to make sense out of it. Otherwise, it would all just be kind of like a random matrix, and nobody knows what the hell's going on with that. And we call that general notion homotopy. And from like a non-math sense, it's kind of homotopy is like wholeness, but from a math standpoint, it's whole HOLE-ness. It's kind of like a universe unto itself. And we refer to this as something called like a Fourier series or Fourier decomposition. And it's basically like creating a meme out of the general, message that's being passed through some type of like a wave. It allows us to look for similarity and also dissimilarity in those patterns, and then reconstruct the message from like a one-dimensional space back up to whatever it was meant to be. From a programming standpoint, we call this a type system. And it's basically how we handle topology in the real world. So it's very cool. It's kind of like two sides of the same coin, or like a yin yang with the reality checks. And it's really important. I mean, nobody's ever done this before. Nobody can actually prove if your software running on some random server somewhere is actually telling you the truth, or that if your servers are actually where they're doing or processing the data they're supposed to. It's a really big deal. And there's a lot of people, especially whether it's in the science world or even in the intelligence world and stuff, kind of a holy grail. And I'm pretty excited to say that we did that. So yay, fuck yeah. Okay. Then we have this other thing too, called an L0 process. Everybody knows about an L1, right? You get your Bitcoins, your Ethereum, whatever, but they kind of live in their own independent like world. There's no real way to sort of like connect them together. And there's also a really dirty little secret about blockchain technology, which is that nobody has a concept for proving this something called finality. So everybody just kind of guesses at the end of the day, what is the chain state? You can argue with me if you want. Go look up the 2016 mining wars. It's a big deal. There's a reason exchanges actually have to run nodes in order to actually figure out what the chain state is. And even then, they're just guessing. We've just frankly been really lucky. And people are really worried about quantum cryptography and stuff, which is, it's there. I actually almost got a PhD in it. I think I'm fine. The finality problem is a really big fucking deal. And so we have this thing called an L0 process, like a little piece of code you can put next to your existing L1, Bitcoin node, ETH node, like Solana node or whatever. And it just outputs a proof that tells you whether or not you actually did achieve finality, and you can trust what this chain state is. So I'm going to be releasing more on that later, but I'm trying to get like some protected patents on some of these things because there's a lot of people with a lot more money than me probably kick my ass and steal it. So we're doing that. And one other thing that's really important too is that we're launching in markets that aren't the West, because an unfortunate reality that people in the West are pretty burned out, and they're pretty burned by a lot of the different projects. And there's just not, people really just want to get out as opposed to get back in. And places, especially in Africa, where the infrastructure is growing so fast that it's really struggling to keep up with demand, people are looking for innovative technologies like what crypto is. So also, just as we were talking about scalability, like we launched a pre-installed app on this, they're called the Phoenix. So you can basically mine our token on like a cell phone. You can also do it on laptops. And there's like a QR code that you can use to download it after this call if you guys want to start mining some of our tokens on the test net. There we go. So it's really cool. We're also really inspired by Threefold and what they're doing here. And just sort of just doing things different and finding the current where it is. Okay. I also have an ecosystem slide here as well. I just want to sort of talk about how does this actually work and like how are we all going to make money, which is very important. So basically our actual product is, it's already, well, it is a product, but it's a programming framework. Whether you call it like an SDK or library, tomato, potato, whatever, but reality actually though, from like an actual implementation standpoint is not implementation, but like, what does it amount to? Is that it's new frameworks for creating your own kind of society. What do I mean about it? Like the applications that we use today, like they're not just products. If you think about Telegram, which we all use in this industry, is it just a SaaS product? Or is it a place where we can interact to exchange information, commercial energy, and the basis for a reality for us, which is what's going on in crypto, right? We have like another aspect are like wrap users. Instead of users, we call them wrappers. Yeah. They're more than just customers. I mean, they sustain these societies by exchanging tokens when interacting with each other, but it doesn't necessarily like cost anything because every time a wrapper opens up a wrap or opens up the Portal app, that wrap mines token and they're able to use them to interact with these different wraps. So obviously we need to create buy pressure to sustain this whole ecosystem. And that pressure comes from traders who create value by managing tokens not necessarily needed for use at the current moment and able to exchange that with buyers. And so this whole kind of loop here creates something that depending on like what industry you're talking about, is a syntropic system or like negentropic, at least like what Ernest Schrodinger call it. And it's kind of alive. I mean, I think so. And it sounds wild to say that, but you should really just not take my word for it. You should just experience it and try it out like there. So I know it's really weird, but you've actually been experiencing a syntropic system your entire life. And it's the experience that we share right now and forever all at once, which we call reality. Yay. All right, shameless plug time. We just finished our SDK and our library for the blockchain development. I'm going to be doing a bunch of live coding stuff throughout the summer and just sort of showcasing how to do things. You can also see in our documentation how to do that right now. You can also use our L0 to integrate directly with other L1s out there, which is cool. We have a new type of cross-chain swap functionality, which allows you to basically move tokens back and forth between these L1s without liquidity pools or kind of that janky stuff. It's really cool. We're basically our own exchange. I think we're going to not launch on exchanges and just have everybody be able to buy and trade things directly from our app, which is pretty sick. And our first wrap with a company called CyberLead, which created a tokenized esports platform. It's a really big industry, which is rife, which is kind of like fraud and stuff. You know, people in like Major League Gaming use like hacks and like first person shooters and stuff. The two founders are actually pro gamers. And yeah, we're launching that right now and doing some like really cool kind of like decentralized LAN parties, old school days, good times, some pop and some Doritos and whatnot. But also what's really cool about these guys is that they're basically kind of just Trojan horsing in a new decentralized cloud by connecting all these different gaming rigs with a giant massive GPUs out there. So for anybody who like wants a cheap way to train some neural nets or something, yeah, we're going to be making that highly available for y'all. So it's really cool. And anyone in hardware, especially, you know, we can put our nodes on pretty much anything, which is really sick. They're really tiny. So let us know. And just thank you to all of our investors and the people we partnered with, especially EV3 and Threefold for having us here. And thank you all. So welcome to reality. Hello. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.